Have you ever been to a party that felt like it would never end, where the laughter grows hollow, and the faces around you become unrecognizable masks in a twisted masquerade? Tonight, Lucas Santoro and his friends are about to find out that some parties don't just last a night, they last forever. Drawn to an exclusive celebration in a remote mansion, Lucas believes he's in for the night of his life. But what begins as excitement quickly turns to something far darker. Lucas is no stranger to strange places. He's a university student with a side obsession for photography, especially the eerie and abandoned. He has photographed empty halls, vacant hospitals, and even decrepit houses that seem haunted by their own histories. So when an invitation to a secluded, legendary mansion arrives, promising a night of mystery and revelry, he can't resist. Alongside his friends, they set off, the thrill of the unknown coursing through their veins, unaware that this night will trap them in ways they can't yet imagine. The mansion stands at the end of a winding, fog-laden road, almost as if it wants to remain hidden. Its walls loom against the dark sky, towering and eerie, with only a few dim lights glowing from within. As they step closer, an unnatural chill wraps around them, and Lucas can't shake the feeling that they're being watched. The front door creaks open as if it has been waiting for them, and inside, the space is alive with music and laughter that feel too perfect. The guests' faces blur in the dim light, their eyes a touch too bright, their smiles a bit too wide, creating an uncanny, unsettling charm that quickly morphs into a silent warning. The air is thick with a sweet, cloying scent that feels almost sickening. Lucas catches himself glancing at the time, expecting hours to have passed already, yet only minutes have slipped by. His friends seem captivated, enchanted by the atmosphere, their voices drowned out by the bass that seems to echo from somewhere deeper, somewhere hidden within the mansion. Lucas finds his fingers itching for his camera, yet when he reaches for it, he feels a hand gripping his shoulder. It's an old man, with hollow eyes and a voice barely above a whisper, saying, "Once you enter, there's no leaving until the night decides." Unsettled, Lucas glances around for reassurance, but his friends are lost in the rhythm, each caught up in the hypnotic allure of the never-ending party. They dance and laugh, seemingly oblivious to the strange eyes watching them from the shadows. Just as he's about to call out, a chilling realization settles in. He can't remember how he got here. The memory of their drive, the laughter, even the invitation, all seem like fragments slipping through his fingers. His heart begins to pound, and he feels trapped, as if the walls themselves are closing in. Yet, when he glances around, everyone else seems oblivious, lost in a party that is anything but normal. Before diving deeper into the mystery, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button if you're as intrigued as Lucas. Because once you enter this mansion, you might not leave, and neither will he. At first, it felt like just another night, a strange, surreal one, but familiar enough. But soon, Lucas realized that the lines between reality and nightmare had begun to blur. As Lucas navigates through the mansion, a strange sense of déjà vu wraps around him, heavy and suffocating. The laughter, the music, the echoing footsteps all feel eerily familiar, as though he's reliving the same moments over and over. He tries to shake it off, but a prickling sensation along the back of his neck suggests that something isn't right, that he's being watched by eyes he cannot see. The room is filled with guests, yet he feels profoundly alone, adrift in a sea of strangers with faces that seem wrong. They're almost human, but their expressions are frozen in place, smiles stretched unnaturally wide as they move with rigid, mechanical gestures that make his skin crawl. The atmosphere is thick with an aroma that seems both intoxicating and sickening, like decaying flowers mixed with the sharp, metallic smell of blood. Lucas feels lightheaded, as though the scent itself is burrowing into his mind, clouding his thoughts. He tries to talk to his friends, but their faces remain blank, eyes glazed as they sway to a rhythm that feels more like a pulse, alive and throbbing, resonating from deep within the mansion's walls. It's as if the house itself has a heartbeat, a dark, relentless thump that seems to mimic his own growing fear. Then something even stranger happens. As Lucas reaches out to touch his friend Daniel's shoulder, his hand goes right through him, as though Daniel is made of smoke, flickering and transparent. He jerks back, his heart racing, but when he looks again, Daniel is solid, laughing with the crowd. The unease gnaws at Lucas, tearing away at his sanity as he realizes that he can't trust his senses. His vision begins to blur, shadows bending and stretching around him, each dark corner seeming to hide something sinister, something that waits patiently in the gloom. Drawn by a faint whisper, Lucas finds himself pulled down a narrow corridor, its walls lined with portraits of partygoers from different eras. Their eyes follow him, their painted faces twisted in expressions of terror or sorrow, as if they too are trapped within the walls of this place. A cold sweat breaks over him as he realizes that each face looks familiar, each one an echo of someone he'd seen at the party moments ago. His fingers brush against the wall, and the wallpaper feels damp, almost like flesh, pulsing faintly beneath his touch. In the distance, a clock chimes, yet the hands are stuck, frozen at midnight. Every time the chime sounds, he feels a deep, hollow emptiness, as if time has lost all meaning here. His phone has no signal, no way of checking the outside world, no lifeline to reality. In the suffocating silence between each chime, he hears whispers, voices speaking in a language he doesn't understand, promising things that send shivers down his spine. Lucas takes a shaky breath, his heart racing as he tries to ground himself in reality. But the house seems to know his fears, twisting and warping in response to every moment of hesitation. The air grows colder, shadows lengthening and creeping toward him, as if reaching out with unseen hands. He's trapped, lost in a nightmare where every door leads back to the party, every hallway a maze that loops endlessly, leaving him spiraling further into a madness that feels all too real. This nightmare has only just begun. As Lucas tries to make sense of his surroundings, an insidious dread starts to creep into every corner of his mind. The mansion feels alive, as if the walls themselves are breathing, watching, waiting for him to falter. As he moves through the crowd, the unsettling sensation of being out of place gnaws at him, like he's a fly caught in a spider's web. The music that once pulsed with a lively beat now has a warped, dissonant tone, echoing in a way that seems to twist the very air around him. The notes hang heavily, each one like a ghostly whisper urging him to stay, to lose himself in this strange, endless night. Lucas looks around, but every face has begun to blur, shifting subtly as though they're wearing masks that conceal something unspeakable beneath. The once familiar faces of his friends now seem wrong, distorted by shadows that cling to their expressions. His best friend, Daniel, smiles, but it's stretched far too wide, his eyes dull and glassy as he sways to the music, completely oblivious to Lucas' growing panic. Lucas tries to reach him, calling his name, but his voice sounds muted, swallowed up by the dense, oppressive air. Every attempt to make contact with his friends is met with the same unnerving blankness, as if they're no longer truly present, as if something has hollowed them out and left only empty shells. In a desperate bid for clarity, Lucas heads towards a doorway that seems to lead out of the main hall. But as he steps through, he finds himself back in the same room, the music louder, the faces even more twisted, as though he's slipped into a deeper, more distorted layer of the nightmare. He can feel his own heartbeat thundering in his chest, the pounding nearly matching the tempo of the music, blurring the line between his fear and the eerie rhythm that fills the room. Each beat seems to pulse through the floor, vibrating up through his legs, as though the mansion itself is feeding on his terror. A shiver runs down his spine as he catches sight of a figure in the shadows, standing just beyond the reach of the flickering lights. The figure is watching him, unmoving, its face obscured. He tries to approach, his legs heavy as if wading through thick fog, but every step only seems to pull the figure further away. It's as if the mansion is toying with him, luring him deeper into its twisted reality. His skin prickles with the sense that he's no longer in control, that the house has become the master of his fate. Then, the lights begin to flicker, casting long, twisted shadows that dance across the walls, stretching and contorting into grotesque shapes. The faces around him blur even further, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light, lips moving in whispers that he cannot hear but feels in his bones. The shadows take on forms, elongated arms, fingers that curl and reach out toward him, their edges fading and reforming as if alive. Lucas stumbles back, his breath shallow and frantic, the edges of his vision darkening as the whispers grow louder, turning into a sinister chorus that seems to be calling his name. Just as he's about to lose himself to the fear, he feels a faint touch on his arm. He turns, and a young woman with hollow eyes and a trembling voice warns him, "Once you're in, there's no way out." Her face is familiar, like he's seen her in the photos on the mansion's walls, a memory long forgotten. Before he can respond, she fades into the crowd, leaving him with the chilling realization that he's not the first to fall victim to this place, and he may not be the last. Lucas backs away, desperate to escape, but every direction he turns reveals the same room, the same party, the same twisted faces. The walls close in, the shadows thickening, each movement tightening the mansion's grip on him. The fear sinks in, a realization that he's not just at a party. He's a prisoner, trapped in a timeless, endless night where terror waits around every corner, feeding off his despair. As the night drags on with no end in sight, Lucas's grip on reality begins to unravel. The mansion twists around him, its walls pulsing and shifting, as if alive and hungry. The partygoers' laughter has transformed into an eerie, echoing cacophony, a twisted symphony that seeps into his mind, clawing at his sanity. Driven by an instinct to survive, Lucas makes a frantic attempt to escape. He rushes through the hall, pushing past partygoers who no longer even resemble people, their faces warped into ghastly, skeletal grins. Their eyes are dark, empty voids that follow him as he stumbles, their hands reaching out, brushing against his skin with a coldness that makes his blood run cold. Lucas finds a staircase and bolts up, the sound of his footsteps swallowed by the oppressive silence that fills the spaces between the mansion's relentless, pounding music. He reaches a door at the end of a narrow corridor and throws it open, hoping desperately for some kind of exit. Instead, he finds himself in a strange room bathed in sickly, greenish light. The walls are covered with cracked mirrors, each reflecting a distorted version of himself, faces twisted in fear, mouths open in silent screams, eyes wide with terror. His own reflection appears to move independently, watching him with a malicious glint, a knowing smile that suggests it has already accepted its fate, unlike him. The air is thick, suffocating, filled with a faint buzzing that makes it hard to think, to breathe. He tries to turn away, but the mirrors hold him captive, each reflection revealing horrors that sink deep into his mind. In one mirror, he sees himself aged, hollow-eyed, his skin sallow and wrinkled as if he's been trapped here for decades. In another, he is surrounded by shadows with ghostly hands reaching out, pulling him into the depths. He feels his own hands trembling, gripping the edges of the nearest mirror as if it's the only anchor to reality. But the glass is icy to the touch, biting into his skin, almost as if the mansion itself is trying to drain the life from him. Then, in a sudden, horrifying moment, his reflection steps forward, closer to the glass, its eyes locking onto his with an intensity that makes his heart pound. It smiles, a twisted, cold smile that feels entirely foreign, entirely wrong. Without warning, his reflection presses its hand against the other side of the glass, and he feels a shock run through his body. His heart races as he realizes that he can feel the cold, bony fingers of his reflection pressing back, blurring the line between what is real and what is not. In that instant, he understands. He's not just looking into the mirror. He's being pulled into it. A rush of panic seizes him, but he can't move, can't look away. The walls around him fade, the room darkening as his reflection's hand begins to press harder, almost painfully, as if it's trying to crawl out. Desperation floods him as he feels himself slipping, his vision blurring, the edges of his mind fading into the cold, merciless darkness. In a final, terrified scream, he tears his hand away from the mirror, stumbling backward, only to realize he's no longer in the room, but back in the main hall. But something is wrong, he can feel it deep within him. The music has stopped, the laughter replaced by a haunting silence. The partygoers stand frozen, their faces blank, eyes empty, staring directly at him. His skin crawls as he notices that they are all holding mirrors, each reflecting his terrified face, but now he's the one trapped inside, his reflection pounding, screaming silently, as he looks out helplessly. The horrifying realization sets in. He's been swapped, trapped behind the glass, forced to watch as his reflection takes his place in the living world, free to roam while he remains a prisoner of the nightmare. And then, in a single blink, the music resumes, the party goes on, and his reflection, his new self, smiles, melting into the crowd, leaving him to scream and pound in silence, forever a captive in the world beyond the glass. When Lucas awakens, he feels a deep, unsettling ache in his chest, as if he's been ripped apart and sewn back together wrong. The echoes of the party are gone, replaced by the eerie quiet of dawn, but something feels profoundly wrong. He's back in his own room, or so he thinks. Lucas tries to ground himself, taking in the familiar sights of his bedroom. But as he blinks, fragments of the night before invade his mind, the distorted faces, the cold grip of his reflection's hand, the mansion's endless corridors. He brushes it off as a vivid nightmare, but a lingering unease gnaws at him, like a shadow he can't shake. Then, his eyes fall on his mirror, an old, framed relic that hangs across the room. The surface is faintly fogged, as though someone had pressed their breath against it, or their face. Shaken, he approaches the mirror, hesitant. His own reflection stares back at him, but there's something off about it. A slight delay, a flicker that sends a chill down his spine. His reflection's eyes seem darker, more intense, like they hold secrets he's better off not knowing. He reaches out to touch the glass, expecting the familiar cold surface. But the moment his fingers make contact, a sharp, icy sensation races through his body, a reminder of that moment in the mansion when he was almost pulled through. As he tries to shake off the feeling, strange things begin to happen around him. Shadows cling to the corners of his room, stretching unnaturally long, even though it's already morning. The ticking of his clock feels too loud, too slow, as if time itself has been distorted. His own reflection seems to move out of sync, its lips curling into a faint smirk whenever he glances away, like it knows something he doesn't. The line between reality and nightmare begins to blur once again, and he starts to fear that he never really left the mansion at all. Desperate to understand what's happening, Lucas digs into his phone, searching for any mention of the mansion, hoping to find an explanation that could make sense of his horrifying experience. His heart sinks as he stumbles upon a local urban legend, a cursed party at a remote mansion where guests vanish, their souls said to be trapped in an endless night. The legend mentions something chilling, a phenomenon called mirror binding, where individuals who try to leave the party become bound to their own reflections, forced to wander the mansion for eternity while their reflections live on in the real world. Panic courses through him as he recalls the sensation of his reflection's hand on the other side of the glass. He can still feel it, cold, insistent, like it was trying to swap places with him. His mind races, replaying fragments of the nightmare, realizing that maybe it wasn't just a dream. His gaze returns to the mirror, dread pooling in his stomach. His reflection stands perfectly still, watching him with an intensity that feels too real, too alive. And then, without warning, it raises its hand, pressing it against the glass, as if inviting him to do the same. Horrified, Lucas stumbles back, refusing to touch the mirror. But his reflection doesn't lower its hand. Instead, it leans closer, its lips moving, mouthing words he can't hear but feels deep within. "We're not done," it seems to say, a twisted smile stretching across its face. Lucas feels a sudden, overwhelming need to destroy the mirror, to shatter the connection before it's too late. But as he lifts his hand, his reflection mirrors him perfectly, its grin widening, taunting him. He hesitates, the lines between himself and his reflection dissolving, the two becoming one and the same. And then it happens, a flash of cold, a flicker of darkness. When Lucas looks around, he's standing in the mirror, staring out at his own bedroom, his own life, but unable to move beyond the glass. The realization crashes over him. He's been swapped, trapped in the reflection, left to watch as his double walks freely into his life, a malevolent glint in its eyes. His silent scream echoes within the mirror's confines, as he pounds helplessly against the glass, praying for someone to notice, someone to realize that he's still trapped, a prisoner of the night that never truly ended. As days turn into nights, Lucas realizes he's trapped in a living nightmare. Every mirror, every reflective surface becomes a reminder of that endless night, of the entity that stole his life. But Lucas isn't ready to surrender. He begins a desperate search for answers, hoping that somewhere, someone has faced this horror and lived to tell the tale. Determined to understand the nightmare that has overtaken his life, Lucas begins his journey by researching the mansion. He finds old newspaper clippings, faded and yellowed with time, detailing strange disappearances linked to the house. The mansion, he learns, has a chilling history. Dating back to the early 1900s, it was originally owned by a wealthy recluse named Dr. Enoch Grayson. Grayson was known for his obsession with the occult, specifically the dark lore surrounding mirrors as portals to other realms. According to rumors, Grayson believed he could trap souls within mirrors, creating a bridge between life and death. His experiments were never proven, but many who visited his parties vanished without a trace. Lucas's blood runs cold as he realizes he is merely the latest in a long line of victims. Driven by both fear and rage, he decides to dig deeper, uncovering a chilling detail in one of the articles. A woman named Eleanor Ferris, who had escaped the mansion decades ago, claiming that her reflection had tried to take her place. Eleanor became known as a madwoman, her warnings ignored and dismissed as lunacy, but Lucas knows she holds the key to his salvation. He tracks down her last known address, a decrepit house on the outskirts of town, half buried in overgrown weeds and shadows that cling like fingers. The house feels as haunted as the mansion itself. Each creak of the floorboards, each flicker of light seems to whisper secrets Lucas isn't sure he wants to know. He knocks, his heart pounding, and an elderly woman with sunken eyes answers. Eleanor's gaze is distant, haunted, as if she's lived 1,000 lifetimes of fear. Her hands shake as she ushers him inside, her voice barely a whisper. "You've seen it, haven't you? The other side, the place where shadows were your skin." As Lucas explains his ordeal, Eleanor listens, her eyes darkening with recognition. She tells him that she too had been lured to a party at the mansion, and like him, had been drawn into the mirrors, losing pieces of herself with each glance. Eleanor warns him that the entity he saw is no mere reflection. It's a mirror soul, a shadow self that exists to consume his life, to replace him entirely. According to her, the mirror soul gains power with each moment he spends in reflection, growing more alive, more real, until Lucas becomes the shadow, trapped forever. Eleanor leads him to a small, dusty room in her house, where mirrors cover the walls, each one covered with a sheet or blanket. "They can see you through any reflective surface," she whispers, her voice trembling. "If you're to reclaim your life, you must confront it, where it all began." Lucas's skin prickles with fear as she describes the ritual needed, a confrontation with his mirror soul in the very mansion where it first took hold. She warns him that the journey will be perilous, that few have tried and even fewer have returned. But she gives him an item, a small, tarnished silver mirror, saying it will show him glimpses of his true self when all hope seems lost. With newfound resolve, Lucas prepares for the dark journey back to the mansion. Armed with Eleanor's warnings and the silver mirror, he sets off, his heart pounding with both fear and a desperate need to reclaim his life. The mansion looms in the distance, darker and more sinister than he remembers, as though it's been waiting for him to return. Shadows dance around its edges, flickering in the moonlight, welcoming him back with an ominous silence. He feels the presence of the mirror soul, lurking somewhere within, a cold chill that seeps into his bones. As he steps inside, the air grows thick, heavy, filled with the faint sound of laughter that seems to echo from nowhere and everywhere at once. The doors slam shut behind him, locking him in, sealing his fate. Lucas's grip tightens on the silver mirror, his last link to his humanity. In the mansion's twisted halls, every shadow seems to whisper his name, every mirror reflecting the cold, empty stare of the entity that stole his life. The true test has begun, and Lucas knows that his only way out is through the darkness, through the terror, and back to the night that never ended. Inside the mansion, Lucas feels the weight of the darkness pressing in on him, a suffocating presence that claws at his mind, blurring his thoughts, making every shadow feel alive and watchful. His heart races, each step echoing through the vast, empty halls as he searches for the place where his nightmare began. The silence is oppressive, broken only by his own footsteps and the distant, ghostly murmur of voices, distorted laughter, fragments of conversations, and whispers that seem to taunt him with memories of that endless night. The mansion is different now, darker, as though it has been waiting for him all along, eager to reclaim him. Shadows coil and twist along the walls, moving with unnatural grace, and Lucas feels as if he's walking through a world caught between reality and nightmare. The air is thick, heavy with the scent of decaying flowers and the faint, metallic tang of blood, intensifying his sense of dread. Lucas clutches the silver mirror Eleanor gave him, its tarnished surface the only reassurance he has. She told him it would protect him, that it would reveal the truth, but as he moves deeper into the mansion, he begins to doubt. Every reflection he catches in the mirrors lining the halls shows a version of himself, but they all look slightly wrong, his face twisted, his eyes dark and hollow, smiling with a malevolence that sends chills down his spine. He looks away, his heart pounding, but he can feel those reflections watching him, waiting. At last, he reaches the grand ballroom where the party had taken place. The room is eerily empty, the silence hanging heavy like a shroud. Dust swirls in the air, illuminated by the faint moonlight filtering through the cracked windows. The once vibrant space now feels like a crypt, frozen in time, and Lucas can feel his mirror soul lurking in the darkness, a sinister presence that watches him from the shadows. He takes a step forward, calling out, demanding that it face him, that it relinquish his life. His voice echoes, swallowed by the room, and for a moment he fears he's alone, trapped in a nightmare that has no end. Then, from the shadows, his mirror soul emerges, stepping into the light with a twisted, chilling smile. It looks exactly like him, yet it's somehow more. Its eyes are sharper, more alive, filled with a cold, mocking intelligence. The creature moves with an unsettling grace, circling him like a predator, its gaze piercing through him, as though it's assessing every fear, every weakness he holds. Lucas feels a tremor of terror ripple through him, but he steels himself, gripping the silver mirror tightly. He's come too far to back down now. The creature speaks, its voice a hollow echo of his own, dripping with malice. You thought you could escape me, it sneers, its smile widening. You gave me life the moment you looked into that mirror, the moment you let your fear breathe into me. It steps closer, and Lucas feels an overwhelming sense of dread, as though the very essence of his being is slipping away, pulled toward this dark reflection of himself. The mirror's soul extends a hand, inviting him to join it, promising him an eternity of freedom in the shadows, of surrendering his life to the darkness. Desperate, Lucas raises the silver mirror between them, and the creature recoils, hissing as though burned by its own reflection. He realizes Eleanor was right. The silver mirror is his only weapon, his final defense. He holds it steady, forcing the creature to see itself, to face the twisted emptiness it embodies. The mirror soul's expression contorts in rage and fear, its form flickering and shifting, as though it's struggling to hold its shape. The creature lunges, its hands clawing at him, but Lucas stands firm, refusing to let the fear take him. He presses the mirror closer, forcing the creature to confront its own darkness, its own hollow existence. The room fills with a high-pitched wail as the mirror's soul begins to dissolve, its form shattering like glass, fragments of darkness scattering into the air. Lucas feels the mansion itself tremble, as though the entire place is reacting to the creature's demise, the walls quivering, shadows fleeing as light begins to creep into the room. But as the creature fades, it lets out one final, bone-chilling whisper, echoing in his mind. "This isn't over, Lucas. I will always be a part of you. Every time you look into a mirror, every time you let fear in. I'll be waiting." And then it's gone, leaving Lucas alone in the empty ballroom. The silence settles, heavy and cold, and he feels a profound emptiness, as though part of himself has been lost in the battle. He stares at his reflection in the silver mirror, half expecting to see the creature staring back, but it's just him, pale, shaken, but alive. He's won for now. The dawn breaks as Lucas stumbles out of the mansion, the sun's light piercing the shadows and filling him with a sense of relief he thought he'd never feel again. But as he looks back one last time, he catches a glimpse of his reflection in the mansion's windows, smiling, dark-eyed, and watching him with a promise of return. A chill runs down his spine, and he knows that the nightmare may not be over, that somewhere, deep in the dark recesses of his mind, the mirror soul is waiting, biding its time until he looks into the glass again. As Lucas steps away from the mansion, he feels a fragile sense of victory, but deep down, a part of him knows he's only escaped temporarily. The real horror has only just begun. The early morning light filters through the trees, casting long shadows across the mansion's stone walls. Lucas stands there, his eyes locked on the windows where faint, dark reflections still seem to watch him, their faces twisted in that haunting, silent smile. He wants to believe it's over, that he's freed himself from the nightmare. But the fear gnaws at him, growing colder with every step he takes away from the mansion. It's as if an invisible chain binds him to the place, pulling him back, whispering that his time here is far from finished. As he returns to his normal life, the world feels different, strangely distant and dreamlike. Friends greet him, unaware of the horror he's endured, their laughter and voices hollow in his ears. He catches his own reflection in shop windows, dark and blurry, sometimes moving out of sync. The worst moments come when he's alone at night, passing by mirrors in his apartment. Every time he catches a glimpse, there it is, his reflection, slightly off, the eyes sharper, glinting with a strange, mocking awareness as if taunting him, daring him to look closer. Sleep becomes elusive, each night filled with nightmares that feel almost too real. He dreams of the mansion, the endless hallways, the mirror-lined ballroom where his reflection waits, eager to reclaim its place. The line between waking and dreaming starts to blur, and he finds himself wondering if he truly left the mansion at all, or if this reality is simply another layer of the nightmare, a false sense of freedom meant to keep him trapped forever. The thought consumes him, slowly chipping away at his sanity. One night, Lucas wakes with a start, a cold sweat covering his body. The silver mirror Eleanor had given him lies on the bedside table, but now it feels heavier, like it's drawing him toward it, calling him back into the darkness. The surface glistens in the moonlight, faint shadows swirling beneath the glass, as if the mirror itself has become a portal, waiting for him to cross over once again. Against his better judgment, he picks it up, staring into its depths, and for a split second, he sees his mirror soul staring back at him, grinning with dark intent. It mouths words he can't hear, but he understands the message all too well. It's not over. The mansion still haunts him, and he knows it always will. It's a part of him now, a lingering darkness embedded in his soul. Every reflective surface becomes a reminder, a doorway that could open at any moment, drawing him back into the nightmare. He can never look into a mirror the same way again, for fear that his reflection might once more try to steal his life. His days are filled with dread, his nights with terror, a life shadowed by the knowledge that his mirror soul is out there, waiting, lurking just beneath the surface. Will he ever be free? Or has he merely postponed the inevitable, doomed to live his life in fear, always watching his reflection, wondering if it will take him back? And what if the mansion doesn't just exist for him? What if it's out there, calling others, pulling more souls into its endless night, trapping them in a prison of mirrors and shadows? If this story left you with chills, if the mystery haunts you as much as it does Lucas, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Tell us in the comments, what do you think happened to Lucas? Will he ever escape the mansion's curse, or is he destined to live in fear of his own reflection? And most importantly, would you dare look into a mirror after hearing this tale? Remember, sometimes the reflections we see might be looking back with more than just curiosity.